Oh, here we are. I got to tell everybody before we get started that we have been having the best conversation. You guys are in for a real treat. I'm going to just give it a few seconds before we get started, just to kind of allow people to pop in. But how's everybody's day going so far?
So good. Kind of hot, but it's okay.
A bit hot, but otherwise, great.
That seems to be the sentiment across the whole U.S. right now. It's so effing hot. All right. Well, let's get started. Hi, everybody. Happy Pride. I know some of the larger cities are just coming out of Pride weekend, so thank you for joining on the literal end of most definitely probably a too much fun weekend. My name is Corey James. I am the brand ambassador for Ancho Reyes and Montelobos at Campari and proud member of the LGBTQ plus community, and my pronouns are he and him. Campari has been hosting these modules on Tuesdays and Thursdays, as you know, all throughout the lockdowns, throughout the pandemic. The talent has been amazing. It's been so great to get to know all of these people that I've worked with. I'll be introducing you to my new friends here momentarily, but just some housekeeping things first. As always, follow Campari Community on Instagram for more info on what our team is up to. Follow PDXCW on Facebook and Instagram for more content just like this. And then also all of the collection of videos are posted on the Facebook page as well as the YouTube page, so you can revisit there as well. And then, as everyone knows, if you have any questions throughout the session, please throw them into the thread, and then we'll address them to myself or our guests appropriately. Now, today's session is sponsored by Ancho Reyes. I like to consider this product to be one of the most versatile spirits in our portfolio. I think there's a gay joke in there somewhere, but I will refrain from saying it. There aren't a lot of classic cocktails you can't elevate using one of these two spirits. Ancho Reyes Verde is really perfect for a shaken cocktail, adding a bright vegetal note with some grilled pineapple notes on the back end. And Ancho Original, which is with its deep, rich notes, allowing the cinnamon and tamarind present in it to push through. And that one is perfect for your stirred cocktails. Poblano chilies are the raw ingredient here, so most definitely you'll get bursts of that flavor, either from the fresh poblanos or the dried anchos, which are the dried versions of a poblano chili. Now, on to our session today, which is a discussion of the importance of LGBTQ plus bars and safe spaces. Safe spaces are so important for our community, especially when the large portion of the spaces we conduct our lives in every day are not always safe. As hospitality workers, we do have the ability to create those safe spaces for any member of the LGBTQ plus community, whether you are behind the bar, you're serving tables, you're in management, you're an owner. It's a beautiful thing when you walk into a bar as a member of this marginalized community and you don't sense any judgment. Because I'm going to be honest with you, this is something that we are hyper aware of at this point. To me, that's really a direct representation of the space itself and how the staff as well as the guests conduct themselves during its open hours. I'm not sure about anybody else, but being able to walk into an LGBTQ plus bar in little old Reno, Nevada, where I grew up when I was 21, is really something that formed who I am today. And being around other people that were like me at that time was so important, not only for my sanity, but for my growth. I think of the people who didn't have that before me or who had to hide these safe spaces from other people or even the police. And the Stonewall Uprising showed us this with police brutality in 1969. Actually, the anniversary was yesterday. So if you haven't done your education and you're new to all of this, this is a really good jumping off point to research the Stonewall uprisings. Now, it may seem like everything is 1,000 times better than it used to be, but we do have a lot of work to do. So that's why we're all really excited to introduce this session, but more importantly, introduce our guests. How are you guys doing? Hello, hello.
Hi.
Hello.
First, we have Parker, or Park. He's from Providence, Rhode Island, and he leads the team at the Eddy, a space that, funny enough, started out as a elitist sort of macho cocktail bar and is sort of kind of molded into what it is today over time. And then you have Rach and Joe from Washington, D.C. They are founders of As You Are Bar. This particular space exists to hold and cultivate a safe and celebratory space for the LGBTQIA plus community. It's a cafe by day and a bar and dance lounge by night. And As You Are welcomes LGBTQ plus patrons from all walks of life and allies in a versatile haven, for queer expression and connection. So, Parker, let's start with you. Why don't you introduce yourself to us? Tell us how you started in the industry, why you are where you are, and then we'll move to Rach and Joe, since they're in the same little box there.
Love that. Hi, everyone. My name is Parker Luthman. My pronouns are he, him. I'm sorry I didn't put them on display. I am the head bartender at the Eddy. It is a neighborhood cocktail bar in Providence, Rhode Island. That is I've been there for about 5 years now. That's actually where I learned to bartend. Like Corey said, it was definitely a different atmosphere when I started there. There wasn't a lot of queer representation behind the bar or in front of it. And it wasn't a bad thing. That was just a sign of the times for that specific space. It was one of the first cocktail bars in Providence, so it was very craft heavy. I think over the years, it has definitely morphed into a more community focused space that does a little bit of craft. But a little bit of why I'm so passionate about creating safe spaces is because I was supported by my staff and my team, and especially my boss there, when I started out, because I was still in the closet as a gay man, and they allowed me to explore my own identity and express myself and grow just by being a part of the team and not really questioning anything. And that's something that has carried over and translated to our guests as well. So I'm really excited for this conversation. And I think we're going to have a really great little kiki here. So
if the last hour has anything to tell us, then yes, we will.
Yeah, let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Parker. Rach and Joe, please tell us how you got where you are. Tell us about the space. Tell us all the things.
Well, I'm Joe. I use she, her pronouns. I have been bartending in queer spaces in DC for 16 years. So I've gotten to see the community shift, and I've gotten to see like how important the amount of connections I've been lucky enough to either help make or just watch happen has shown me what our spaces need to do and need to be. And as I've educated myself personally, knowing how to stand up and use this platform, like recognizing how important these spaces are in the community and what you do there, that's really why we decided to start our own, because we wanted to be able to just do more community-based and not even less booze-based, but not make it all about drinking or dark or loud, and wanting to make a space that's more inclusive to people who are older or who are younger or who don't drink, and find ways to really reach out to the community and bring people together. So I've been really fortunate to sort of watch it happen. I love being behind the bar. I love a busy night on a dance floor and really being like the hostess of that party while being like responsible. And I was fortunate enough to meet and fall for this stunning human 3 years ago. And well, we were best friends for the bulk of that time. And our missions really aligned, and she like took it a step further.
Yeah, so I'm Rach. I use she, they pronouns. I've been in DC for about 8 years and started in the industry in the position of security, and so kind of realized that I didn't know it, but that's somewhat my calling. I just am a person that wants to, I'm very observant. I want to make sure that the people around me are comfortable. I grew up very mask of center, feeling a lot of shame around that, having a lot of trouble in bathrooms, and so had gotten hyper aware of my surroundings, and then understanding other people have maybe different challenges that need looked out for. And so I've kind of always been that human, and then being able to do it for this community was a game changer for me. So that's how I got to know Joe. I was security at A League of Our Own, which was the bar we worked at previously, and yeah, we just, like she says all the time, we kind of fell into step and decided that there were things we couldn't do as well as we wanted to at that location, just because we weren't in charge, and we wanted to do it better and include more of the community in some of our decisions, and have this be like the community's bar, not just our bar. We rarely even call it that. So we're super stoked to, just protect this larger community of queer humans, and then all the communities that intersect under that community, because we touch people. We have people in the queer community from all walks of life, and sometimes they get left out. So we're really excited to include them.
This is great. I think that you don't really find a lot of spaces that are as inclusive as the space that you're speaking about right now, which is why we're here to discuss these moments. So I just want to start off our conversation with, obviously we're all trying to make more inclusive spaces, and this could be geared towards more LGBTQ plus bartenders, servers, whatever, but it also could be geared towards members of other communities as well who are serving to make their spaces more safe. Now, let's start off the conversation with gender neutral greetings. So this is something that I find to be interesting to discuss. So why don't you guys go ahead and start that off for me?
Well, I struggled for a while because I'm from California. And so using guys to greet a group, hey guys,
Yep.
I considered that for a long time to not be gendered. And it's super triggering for people who are fighting to really put their identity out there and share that information. And I come in with good intention, but the impact is to immediately dismiss people by saying, hey guys. And so that was the first step in my removing gender.
Yep.
Was to really stop myself. And when we trained staff, Rach found this great genderless greeting document, and we shared it with our staff, and we're like, there are ways to do this without presuming gender. And the concept of that is that you can give great customer service without gendering people. In fact, it's better for our community.
And in my position as a training security staff, that's like usually the first point of contact when you enter these locations. And so on many levels, that immediate interaction sets the tone. So not only is it important that the people that walk up to your door feel seen, fully seen, it's that your greeting can throw that off the rails immediately, right? So one of the things that we use frequently is, hey friends, hey folks, how y'all doing? Hey y'all. And any of those work, and they're warm. And I love friends, because if you're coming in here and this is your safe space, we're probably already friends. We have a lot in common. Let's just kick it. It also makes dealing with them if they get overserved later easier, because they're your friends. But I think that initial point of contact is so important, and it's all anybody really wants is to feel seen. That changes everything, and that greeting can either make that a special experience or really throw it off the rails.
Parker, how do you apply this to your space at the Eddy?
Yeah, so I became more sensitive of how I greeted my guests, actually when I was behind the bar about 2 years ago before COVID, because I had a bad experience where I spoke to this one group of people and I said, can I grab you guys another drink? And the nonverbal communication of their entire experience completely shifted in an instant. And in that moment, I was like, oh, I messed up. And I was like, and I had to take ownership. I was like, I'm so sorry. I was like, I realized what I've done in the moment. I hold myself accountable, and I hope that we can finish this experience together on a high note. And I was able to turn it back around. But from that moment, I was like, wow, like one word is so violent to a group of people who are just trying to be seen for who they are, and they don't want to always have to fight for it, and they shouldn't have to. So I carried that over going into COVID, because with the lockdown, we switched over to outside seating. And so we had to start using a reservation system. And so we used Resi. And so I found myself hosting a lot more often. And so I kind of took a mental note, when I was hosting, like, you set the standard, you set the expectation, whether it's like the COVID safety, but also the greetings. And I would make sure that the only things I ever said were folks, y'all, the number of people coming. I'm like, okay, for the 5 of you, this is your table. I would never say ladies or guys or anything. And that carried over to how I greet tables as well. Like, I feel like when we're in the moment, because the Eddy is a high volume cocktail bar, it's very easy to make that slip and be like, can I grab you guys anything else? But you have to take that like millisecond to catch yourself, and you have to train your brain to do that. So instead I'd be like, can I grab anything else for the table? Do you two want anything else? How we doing, y'all? And it's just been super helpful. And I've had some guests like feel open enough to thank me for doing that. And I was like, it kind of goes back into intent versus impact, like having an intentional impact will just carry over to everything. And it's been super helpful. And then now it's the only way I talk to people. So
it speaks to privilege a little bit, because like as a cis woman, I don't mind lady or ma'am, and I'm certainly not bothered by y'all or folks. So to like remove the easy, which is that, you know, people of privilege, is that we default. And so to take that away and create a moment for the nuance, because it's that kid who's not out yet or who's struggling will notice that nuance, and maybe won't know you did it intentionally, but that part doesn't matter. The part that matters is we didn't send them further away from the community by using language that was insensitive.
Well, and I feel like this is such a thing. I mean, I grew up in small town Nevada, and so saying "Hey guys" is something that you always said, and it was one of the more difficult things for me to unlearn, because now I'm saying "y'all" all the time, and people are like, "Where are you from?" And I'm like, "Damn it, I'm not from the Midwest." You know, but it's definitely something that you really have to change your behavior, and you're learning, but you also have to understand the reasons why you're saying it. You know what I mean? Like, why are you changing that behavior? It's not just because you need to change it. It's like you have to understand the reasons why. And I think that's one of the more important things.
That's like one of my favorite lessons too, is that a lot of times we'll get guests who are visiting from the South who are like heterosexual couples. And like, "Oh, you from the South?" I'm like, "No, I'm from South Jersey." And they're like, "Oh, like, why do you say y'all?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's a gender neutral greeting." And they have like a light bulb. It's it's those little tiny conversations that are also creating impact that you don't even think about, because we're so used to it thinking it has to be this big giant task. But it's like those day-to-day conversations that have really, I think, created change, especially within my own personal workspace, at least. So
I've had a lot of challenge with being mistreated, especially the bathroom. It's a really dangerous place for me, typically. And I grew up feeling like I was the problem and I'm making people uncomfortable because of the way that I express myself. And I was probably like 26 before I realized that if I can have the courage to be, then I'm a real gift to these people, because then they have to deal with me and we get to have a conversation, and then they realize sometimes people that use this restroom look like me, and that's okay. I belong in here. And some of the argument is like, well, this is just so much, and this is so hard. I have to learn all these new things, and blah, blah, blah. And people of privilege have that argument. And I'm like, I understand this is going to take a little work. I have some grace for that, and I respect that. So like when you falter and you correct it, I've got patience. But imagine living a whole lifetime having to literally talk yourself up and find the courage to go use a restroom, like, or decide not to use the restroom and be miserable because you're afraid of that experience. Like, I'm working hard every day to exist in this culture. You can do a little work to make it a little easier on those of us that, you know, have to do that hard work just to do things of survival.
This particular topic is very funny to me because, you know, we live in a world where everything is so one or the other, black or white, gay or straight. You're a man, you're a woman, and life is so much more nuanced than that. And so when you walk up to a bathroom, obviously my pronouns are he and him. I walk into the men's restroom, but I cannot even imagine what that feels like to not have it. To not have it be inclusive for you. So that's another thing. Change your restrooms to all gender.
We've had lots of conversations around gendered restrooms, and it's an object. So why are we gendering it first of all? And there are so many ways, and I always try to say this because I received this feedback once, and I'm still so grateful to the individual who gave me this feedback. The restroom signs that had the triangle skirt, the rectangle pants, and then an alien, and said, "We don't care, just wash your hands," which was meant to be really positive. And this person who is non-binary came up and was like, "If you could not other people," and I was like, I am so sorry, because it was meant to be, a tongue in cheek. But what it did instead was, again, further alienated this clientele that I care very much about. And so, to Parker's point earlier, the capacity to be held accountable and thank people for that accountability and then fix it, that's all the steps that have to be taken.
Yeah.
Thank you for holding me accountable. I'm really sorry you had that experience. Here's what I'm going to do to fix it. It's 3 steps, and people of privilege like really struggle with being held accountable.
And this perception that people that are in the margins, whether that be gender, sexuality, or race, are like just out here ready to argue everybody with every like mistake that's made. That's not the reality. I don't want to argue and be mad all the time. I want to tell you so you know. But don't like come at me defensive. Just be like, "Oh, I didn't know." And
you know who wants to argue and be mad all the time are the people in places of privilege.
Yeah. It's so true. And the restroom is such an easy for proprietors. It's such an easy way to ensure safety.
And when I go somewhere, I usually don't go to the restroom first because I want to know what they look like before. So I was whoever goes first. I'm like, "Hey, let me know what those restrooms look like." And when somebody comes back and it's like, oh, it's a single stall or it's non-gendered or whatever, I'm like, my perception of the location I'm in and the proprietors that are running it, I'm like, yeah, now I like this place more.
That's awesome.
Where they're thoughtful.
Can I ask you what you changed the restroom to the sign after you got that feedback?
So that was not our call. I wasn't allowed to change it in the position I was in.
I see.
So all I could do was apologize. Again, part of why we now own our own and are opening our own space, because those are the kind of arguments I don't want to have with ownership. Like I need to be able to immediately fix it. For instance, we did a pop-up and the pop-up had 2 restrooms and they had an M and a W. My privilege is W can mean water closet or women, and I can go in there. And I had a customer who was a trans man come up and say, the men's room only has urinals, and I'm a man who doesn't use urinals. And I was, again, thank you, I'm so sorry. And so now on the doors, when we do that pop-up, we just write it up, urinals and stalls, and type it. But there was this like super classy, I say this because we don't really classy that much. We are very classy humans. But like sometimes we go into spaces and I'm like, I am not this cool. Anyway, it's a great little coffee shop that's like stunning. It's all like this sort of French bistro style. It's called Tate, like latte with a T. But they have single bathroom stalls and it just says toilette, which is classier than toilet. Then you know what's happening there. So what we're doing, there's a local restaurant chain called Busboys and Poets here in DC. Phenomenal. What they do is it's full doors that are all separated, and then a trough style sink.
It's in a big open room.
And that's what we're going to do, and we're just going to write restrooms.
And I'll say, for suggestions for anybody that has like closed doors, be impeccable. Like I went to a restroom and the one door was like standing, seated. And I was like, I love that. Or stalls, urinals. Now I know what's in there. Like I just think there's something kind of sexy about impeccability. Like when you say what it is, I'm like, that's that. So I feel like that's an easy way to do it. Like,
and we'll have in our space, our plan is we're working with architects now is to have several just toilets in a room. And then on one room have a sign that has a wheelchair, a changing table, and a urinal and a toilet, and just put that on there. So that one in particular will have a higher seat on the toilet for folks who are disabled. We'll have a changing table for folks who have babies. We'll have a urinal for folks who like to stand up, and then we'll also like those. Just tell people what it is, you know. And there are ways to make it cute. Water closet is a great, super cute, because there's like kind of a throwback Euro vibe to that.
I'm into that one.
The first time I ever saw was a total dive bar and it just said WC, and I was like,
the first time I traveled abroad, I was with my husband. And I was like, what's WC? And he was like, it's the bathroom. And I was like, oh my God, I feel so stupid. I know. No, definitely. I don't follow that classy, space.
Yeah.
But it's like signage.
We have
sign for your restrooms for $1.99. There's so many opportunities to just do a nice thing, like the right thing for your community.
Yeah. Parker, what were you going to say?
Yeah. At the Eddy, we only have one bathroom and it's always been this way. It's been this way for like 7 years. So that's like, I guess that was like pretty progressive for the time, but it just has a giant WC on it. And every single time someone asks what it means, and we always say water closet, and they're like, the way they ask it, I'm just like, it's European. I don't know, just go in it. It's gender neutral. It's single serve, you know, like it's not that hard. And then one of the clubs by us just reopened post-COVID, and they used to have men's and women's bathrooms, and now it says gender neutral, parentheses, with stalls, with urinals. And so I thought that was really cool. And I was like, I put that in my back pocket for whenever I open a space. So
these specific moments have been a lot of verbal communication, like, hey, fix your bathroom, do better. Hey, you know, don't call me guys, whatever. How do we like navigate nonverbal communication? Like, how do you navigate that in your bar space that you're in now with nonverbal communication? Because I feel like obviously this is a much tougher one to pay attention to, but I think we're all pretty empathetic given the life that we've grown with. So whoever wants to start, please.
I think for me, like, I had a lot of my knowledge and like the way that I carry myself comes from bad experiences, because we're all human, we make mistakes, we offend people, we say something stupid, or we like cause something that's damaging to someone, and we have to own up to it. So like my biggest thing is whenever I approach, I'll say in the style of service, like whenever I'm approaching a table, I walk into the conversation like understanding that this individual has a very specific lived experience that I probably can't fully relate to. And so I always like try to watch how they're sitting at the table before I enter like the conversation. Like, do they change the way they sit? A lot of times I'll notice, like, especially with younger queer couples, they're like sit at the table, they're very open, and the minute you go over to them in this like classy cocktail bar, they like put their hands they put their hands under the table, their shoulders start to shrug a little, they kind of start looking down, and I'm like, oh, this is like nonverbal communication that they're used to feeling like they're being looked down to. And so I always I'll try to open up the conversation with a really gay joke or something, like just say something super flamboyant,
funny,
or something stupid, like so dumb, and like it immediately breaks down that wall, and like they kind of like, I'll notice that like they'll kind of shift towards, like they'll open up their body language to me, and I think that was like really cool to watch, and it's kind of like a social psychological experiment sometimes. I'm like, how far can I get this person to open up a little by being a clown? Because I think they're used to like sometimes like very formal or semi-formal table service. And like part of what I do on the floor is just to like really break it down and be like, what kind of drink you like? You like tequila? This one's delicious. It has honeydew in it. It's delicious. You know, like just like almost like hosting at your house, you know, just like get them to feel comfortable to sit on your couch. Like it's not that hard, and like we're trained to be that kind of server or like that kind of hospitality professional. You can just take those tools and just translate it to these people that just want to be treated like the rest of the people in the room.
Yeah, I think, and I think in hospitality in the service industry, that's just good service anyway.
Exactly.
Like you should be reading your customers' body language when they first come in, and it just, like most of these conversations, when you're working in a marginalized community and that's who you're servicing in particular, you need to just move that up a bit. And that's why training your staff is so important. And Rach can speak to this, the safety management is that because we're the front, that's the first space they see, that's where that has to be established. And like, you know, especially when we're talking about keeping the space safe.
Yeah,
I think body language is huge, especially that initial contact. If we call it safety management, we're stepping away from the idea of security, because that's such an intimidating, we have a perceived intimidation by that, right? And so like the body language of that safety management person at the door, are they like trying to be hard and tough? Do they look like they're scary? Or are they like, hey, and smile and gentle? And like, I think that's big. I think one of the things that we probably did incidentally and didn't realize the power of it was naming our bar As You Are. So non-verbally, people like immediately know what we want them to do, which is come as they are.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of, I mean, it's huge. People hear the name and they're like, we get it. We know, got it, cool. And which means it's completely inclusive. You can be straight and come as you are. You just have to celebrate and appreciate and love our culture. And if you do, come on, let's do this, you know? So that's we kind of got lucky there, because impeccability is sexy, so we just went with it, and then people really got it, you know?
And I think speaking of nonverbal, that can go both ways in terms of keeping an eye on the safety and the comfortability of our customers. Somebody who's too touchy with people they don't know, the safety management team might have to go have a conversation, particularly like in spaces we've worked in when cis straight men kind of come by themselves and like are a little creepy. And we are never going to gender someone at the door, regardless of how straight looking they are, because what does a straight man look like? Like, what does a gay person look like? We are really looking to shift that narrative. And
not us.
No,
not us. No, I don't want to be. I don't want to be.
We also, I mean, we never profile any human person and the way they appear, but I guess it's profiling your behavior. You come in here and you're like staring at two girls making out, and you're like barely drinking, and you're not meeting anybody. I'm gonna be like, hey friend, what you come in for tonight? And then one of two things happens. They're like, I was just leaving, and I'm like, that's a great idea. I'm glad you thought of it. And or they're like, I'm meeting my friends, and I'm just like nervous, or I'm exploring my sexuality and I don't really know what to do. And then I'm like, great, do you mind if I introduce you to some people? And all of a sudden this behavior that's making the patronage that came here to feel safe uncomfortable, we've just broken down that wall, and now we're making connections, and this person knows we want them there, or they can't be here that way, whatever the case might be. And it prevents so much having to secure a space down the road, because we've just nixed the problem.
This is all.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Please go ahead.
Well, I was just saying from a nonverbal standpoint, so much, and I've been bartending since I was 23, and I started in a club, like a dark, loud, 300 vodka sodas in an hour kind of a space. Like, I can put 8 cocktail glasses and like pound them. I've never done craft a day in my life. God bless you, Parker. I don't know what herbs to put in cocktails.
It's fine.
We'll talk later. I'm like, I learned 2 weeks ago why people smack the mint before 2 weeks. 16 years in service. 2 weeks ago, I was 2 weeks years old. But I think so much of our gig and what makes people bartenders and service industry folks is we are watching for nonverbal communication almost more than verbal communication. We are paying attention to if someone comes in and pounds a shot and asks for another, like, okay, you've told me something there. If somebody is sort of like finds a dark corner and, has their shoulders up, we're paying attention to those nuances, and our response to that, verbally and non-verbally, matters. I'm not going to put my arm around somebody I don't know as a bartender, and you know what I mean? Like, our non-verbal response to things, even like if the police, we have a liaison unit with Metro PD for the queers, an LGBTQ liaison unit. They'll come in and check on the bars. I will go say hello because I know them and walk them back out once they've scanned the room, because that's all they need. There are some proprietors who think like, and I believe in defunding the police. I think we're doing it wrong. Our system was built incorrectly, and we just have perpetuated that incorrect structure. That's another conversation. For me as a proprietor, I have patronage who is very uncomfortable when there's police presence. I don't care how wonderful or how gay the police officer is. So thank you for checking the safety. Let's go chat outside. Like, I don't need them to stay in the space to provide safety. We hire people for that. I'll call you if we have something we need you for. But my nonverbal response tells everyone in the bar where I stand, like, this person is safe. It's like with your dog, right? You like, if you are cool with a person, your dog is like, oh, okay, they're all right. And like little children, you want to pay attention to that. I'm not going to go like have a huge like chummy chat with, even if I have, when my police officer friends are out of uniform, that's a different story. When they come into the bar, it's like, you saw everything looks okay. All right, let's chat on the sidewalk about what you need in this moment. Yeah. So there's a balance to that I think, again, we have to think that more stringently if we're going to be leaders in this community and the surrounding marginalized communities. Our nonverbal communication matters as much as theirs.
Well, this is something that's really, like, you would think that coming into the hospitality industry that being hospitable is exactly what we're talking about right now. This is part of your job. So for anybody that's listening that thinks that they do this well, you probably don't. So take some notes here and really pay attention to the things that are happening around you in your space. I cannot tell you how many times I've walked into a bar, and unless the bartender knows who I am, they don't come over. They take their time. They don't read any verbal cues. They don't know that I'm like upset because I've been sitting for 20 minutes. They also don't know that I don't feel very comfortable with the demeanor that's coming off of the bar. So it's like, it kind of goes both ways. But the point is that being LGBTQ plus community, we are so effing hospitable in every part of our life. Like, right? Like, this is what we do. We're always like, oh, are you okay? Is everything okay? And, you know, especially behind the bar and especially in a safe space, this should be how every space should be safe.
Yeah.
Honestly. Like, let's be honest.
Yeah.
So
I'm glad we kind of talked about this because so far it's been a very like positive conversation. But the truth is that like it can also be very hard. Like there's a lot of work that goes into creating the safe space. It's like building the structures of security to make sure that you have the protection that when you need to call on it, God forbid, hopefully you don't have to. Like my experience at the Eddy is that we are not like a high volume dancey kind of bar. We're a sit down only cocktail bar where a lot of people come in groups already. It's sometimes people meet up with each other. There's a lot of first dates, but it is a different vibe. It's sit down, it's full service. It's very attentive, proactive hospitality. That's kind of how we carry ourselves. And so like, I've had to be the one who had to like tell someone that like, they're acting a little predatory towards either like a younger person, no matter like their sexuality, or especially on like I've had moms touch my arms while I'm bartending, and I had to put the shaker down. Like, we don't do that here.
Yeah.
You know, and like it's so uncomfortable, and it like the anxiety will like boil over in you. But I had to learn how to like sit in that anxiety and be like, well, what do I really want to come out of this situation? And I was like, I want them to stop. And so you have, like, I've learned how to just sit in it and just be like, this is going to suck. This is going to be really bad. But eventually, the great thing is that
your
this
staff and your patronage benefits from you doing that
exactly.
work.
You
and
have
as
to
a
control
leader,
the room.
You're taking responsibility for setting that example, which is enormous.
So on the opposite end, even though you are being very hospitable to your guests, we're also having to police the guests' behavior.
Yeah.
So I guess this could be another conversation topic. Like, what are the ways that you do this in an effective way so that you're getting your point across, but you're also mitigating the anger that may come off of the person that you're talking to?
Yeah. For me, like it usually ends up like if you have to tell someone to leave someone alone or like a staff member alone, because we've like 86 people from the bar before. They always get defensive. I mean, of course, no one thinks they're in the wrong when they're having a good time. Like that's just how we are.
This ain't your house.
So
this isn't your house.
The easiest thing to do, like, I give them one chance, and then the second time I said, listen, when you enter this space, you entered a nonverbal agreement with us as the bar patron or the bartenders and the staff and the patrons, that you will respect the boundaries of the other groups and members that are in this space. And if you can't do that, then you don't need to stay. And here is your check. And then I was like, and then if they don't feel like paying, I'm like, okay, well, luckily we have a reservation system. So now I have your name and your contact info, and now you're not allowed back. So have a great night.
Zing.
And like, they can't argue that.
I'm going to Yelp you.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want your business if you're going.
It's just like,
not a space for that.
It's fine. And then they always say like, fine, I'll take my money elsewhere. I'm like, that's fine. We'll take someone else's. Like, I'm sorry that you're so uncomfortable with this situation, but you've made many people in this space uncomfortable.
This is important. These are perfectly appropriate reactions to having a guest that is being inappropriate. Absolutely acceptable. I think that the problem in the conversation also is which people are doing that, that to you. Right. It's generally a specific person. It's not other gay people generally. You know what I mean? Like,
I would challenge you on that.
I said generally. I live
we
in
can
LA.
Be problematic too.
I live in LA.
As Rach, as a masculine person, gay men really take a lot of liberties because she walks through the world looking this way. And that's not appropriate. And the number of times I've been told, oh, that's just gay bar culture. Well, it's not my gay bar culture.
Exactly.
And I'm not going to allow, so we model our bar after the enthusiastic model of consent, which means if 5 shots of tequila are ordered, 5 people have to say hell yes. Because if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. And just watching patrons who don't really want a shot be like, wait, I can say that? Honey, that's consent. Yeah, you can. Like, and these are the places where rape culture gets perpetuated because people take liberties past others' boundaries. And and that's why, Parker, I think your capacity to sit with your own anxiety in that moment is so important, because not only are you teaching that patron a lesson, but somewhere in your bar, maybe sitting who would never tell you, is some like quiet queer who's like,
paying attention.
I can tell someone not to touch my hand or my arm. Rach had a great conversation with a patron who went to order from the bar and someone was standing there and they grabbed the girl's shoulder to lean forward.
Oh yeah, lay it out. Oh, tell me this one.
Well, yeah. So I was bartending and somebody was trying to get to the bar and he like leaned over, grabbed her shoulder, and he wanted my service. And so he starts spouting off his drink and I was like, hold on. So before we do that, I'm gonna need you to take your hand off her shoulder. And he was like confused. And the girl, the AFAB human at the bar was being very quiet because victims are voiceless, and was like, oh, yeah, whatever, it's fine. And I was like, so we don't touch people without consent. You haven't spoken to her. You're not with her. I need you to remove your hand, and then we can talk drinks. And he's like, it's just her shoulder. And I was like, I don't care if it's her shoelace. It's hers, and you don't touch it. And that's so good. And then he says, he looks at her, which I'm a life coach and I work in like eliminating abuse. So I have to be very sensitive to these things that people say that are culturally normal. He says, she doesn't care. You don't care, right? And of course she's feeling pressured to say she doesn't care. So she's like, I mean, that's fine. And I was like, nope. If you consent, this is fine. But until you do, and until you ask, it's not fine, according to me, in this space, and you will stop touching her shoulder. And he
if you want to drink.
And I was like, this is not up for debate. And he laughed angry, and I was like, feel free to leave, because we're not doing this here. And she deserves a safe space more than you're entitled to a beverage. And so this is like, it was done. And I think that, and when he left, she, very shy human, was like, thank you. I was like so afraid to say. And we, of course, as AFAB humans, we know that you get catcalled on the street, you're supposed to be polite so you don't strike up their ego and then get yourself in more danger, which is the feeling she was having. She was trying to keep herself safe and had to disregard her discomfort so she didn't feel further discomfort. And I was like, that's not how we do things here. And it kind of ended. And I just think that people, there was something I was going to say, I can't remember now. But yeah, privilege, right? Like this is all kind of connected to this entitlement and privilege. And as a massive center human, I walked into a restaurant, like I was in an interracial relationship with a child, and we would walk in and I would be like dressed masculine. They'd think I was like some white man, and I wasn't even with this group of people typically because they separated us. And I would get like this amazing service at the host stand. It was like, oh, sir, how are you doing? And all this stuff. And then when I spoke, because my voice is more feminine and I look like I haven't hit puberty yet because I'm not a boy, they would like realize what was happening. And they were like, now I'm in a tie. Now they're confused. And I would just watch like this incredible treatment just decline rapidly. And then they're like, oh, you're with them. Oh, you're in a relationship. Oh, this is like all of the marginalization of an intersectionality of our.
You just watched it happen.
And I just watched all of that treatment go out the window and all that privilege disappear. And I was like, this is remarkable. Like,
yeah.
Well, this kind of brings it to, based on what you guys have all just said to me, like how you're obviously leading by example, right? Like, what about all of the staff that you employ? Are they all queer? Are they a mix? Is it like, how are you training your staff to do as you do?
Go ahead,
For me
Parker.
personally, like I am the only, no, we have 3 queer people, one is married. And there hasn't really been a full-on training, to be honest. It has happened very naturally in very organic conversations. It's a lot of me just pointing out things because I have a hard time structuring trainings because I feel like sometimes they just go out the window because it feels like a class and not like we're all adults. We don't want to go to class anymore.
Yeah.
So like I like teaching within the moment where I'm just like, hey, I didn't really like the way you addressed that table, or like, did you notice how that person kind of turned their shoulder to you? Like, what did you say to the table? And they're like, oh, I said, like, can I grab you guys anything else? I was like, did you look at their face? I was like, how were they dressed? Like, just little things, like very nuanced experiential lessons in the moment. I think it's kind of how I treat table, like guests. It's just very much like small, tiny conversations. But like, you can always see like in my staff's brains, they're just like, oh, like, because I think like in order to learn, sometimes you have to fumble, and I'm just the person to kind of like bring it out in a second. And it's always in like a very nurturing and loving way. It's never like scolding unless it seems very dangerous or violent. But we're lucky that we haven't had those situations where someone has like gotten up and left because they felt discriminated against to that degree. So like, I'm very fortunate and lucky. Providence is a very liberal, very queer friendly, and a very forgiving city. Everyone kind of knows each other. So it's a community within itself. It's the same patrons that go to the same 6 bars. So it's like, I'm very privileged in that regard because I have a very great supportive staff that helped me from a very young age. And I'm prefacing all of this with that because I know it's not that easy for other people in other communities. What I actually just came up with this idea because I forgot about it until recently. I think thinking about this class is I want my staff to attend a bystander intervention training because I've attended 3 in my career, one at a very young age, and all of the tools that you learn from it on how to read, nonverbal communication, coming up with code words like on the fly in the middle of services, like that table's at an orange right now, someone needs to step in, versus like a yellow, which is like just keep an eye on it, versus a red is that table's got to go kind of thing. Like those, I didn't realize that I took all of those lessons from those trainings with me, especially in the last 2 years. But that's like a very easy, structured, very inexpensive training to help build all of these sensitivities that we're so used to having for members outside of the community to, if they want to, create more impactful, safe spaces, and to also empower their staff to feel the same way. Because the only reason I'm able to do what I do is because I know I have the support from the top down from my group. And so that's huge because I've worked in other bars where I've had the support from the owners and the managers and the staff, but the clientele was so bad that I've had to exit because I was just like this. I know how supported I am, but I don't have enough power within this space to truly create the change that I want to see. And therefore I'm swallowing and sacrificing a lot of my own humanity just to get by, because otherwise I'm going to fight someone. So
that's a lot of energy you're putting out.
It's too much. I can't do it.
We're very excited to start hiring. We have a couple of not-for-profits here in DC that do work with youth in our community. So we're hoping to hire from those pools because much of what those not-for-profits here in DC do is help with finding employment, because that job insecurity is one of the problems that our community faces so huge, which is part of why we were so excited to start this, was because we can provide jobs to our community. So it'll be QBI POC to the front in terms of our hiring practices. And we're probably looking at about a week of training. And what I'm really excited is for the curriculum Rach comes up with for safety management, taking the ego out of security. And like her having the opportunity, because all of our staff will go through that, regardless of what position. Like safety management will have some of their own training, but essentially bystander intervention and our culture, we're so fortunate to be starting something new that we're starting at ground level and we get to build it with our staff and learn as we go, which is huge because Rachel has really taught me about removing your own ego. Like I know I don't know. And I have 16 years, I know a lot, but I also know I don't know. And we are willing to be the kind of owners who bring the staff in and ask about their experiences and about like what kind of culture we want to build here, and then use training to ensure that's what happens.
Yeah. I think that, I mean, Parker, a lot of what you're talking about is like this bystander stuff. That's like so nuanced. And so when you ask, like, how do you instill this in your staff if it's something that you're kind of maybe naturally inclined to pay attention to, maybe because of your like experience in life, you've learned that.
Right.
And it is super nuanced, and finding a way to like simplify it down so it's just a principle list of principles that we abide by is really useful. One of the things that we say all the time is that one of the most loving things we can do is hold people accountable. So even in that patron accountability, I think, you know, the old school saying of like, customer's always right. Well, they're not actually always right. And while like a staff and as safety management, one of the first things, there's three things we focus on. One is that our staff is secure, because if the staff isn't safe, they can't create the atmosphere to be entertaining and safe for our patrons, so they're the priority. And then our patrons are second, and then who's coming in and out the door, making sure IDs are checked and things, bags are checked and things like that. But if we don't, so we have to hold our patrons accountable, even when they're wrong, even though they have the money to pay us, because the other patrons deserve that. And we have to hold our staff accountable, and immediately. And Parker, to your point, like, I don't think you have to get like big and mad and aggressive. If you make a correction and they are like just defiant and think like, they're like, I'm not going to do that. Well, then you're not going to work here. I think keeping it really simple, right? Like, you don't have to do that. You have options, but you won't be employed here, because that's what we do here. Or if they do it and they do it again and again and again and don't seemingly take it seriously, then we get to sit down and have a more intense private conversation. But setting that standard that like, yes, we're like leading this team and we've done the research and we've spoken to the communities to discover what makes their experience safe, the experiences we don't have because we're white and we only represent the parts of the community we are. And we've done that research, and you can be a part of a marginalized community and still mistreat people. Like, it's not like a free pass to mistreat people because people have mistreated you, right?
Yeah.
And I think just finding a way to simplify those nuances and give them some principle lists to kind of keep track of, really, like, it helps them, helps your staff think like you, see like you.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, we have this, I'm going to turn our camera for a minute. We have this sign that that says consent is sexy. Underneath it says, here it's mandatory. So that will sit at our front door. It did at our last bar, and we will keep that tradition going, because what that does is set a standard, and it sits right behind the door person. So they like immediately have less to say, because you are getting a sense of what you're walking into. We also had a much larger sort of written out sort of house rules. And I think having those up, gives the more likely to be dismissed by the culture humans. Those humans get, the more marginalized, have a sense of like, all right, so I can say I'm allowed to call this in or call this out. And then the people who are going to be defiant, whether patrons or staff, are going to be like, all right, well, they put it in writing on the wall. So I guess.
It's literal signage.
It's also your nonverbal agreement you mentioned, Parker, right? Like patrons are, which is why like our mission reads the way it does. If you're coming to this space, this is what happens here. If you're not going to do those things here, you're not meant to be in this space. It doesn't matter how you come. That's true. That's going to be true all day.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's powerful. And when your staff is held accountable, or a patron is held accountable, you're educating everybody that gets to view that. The number of times I've had a conversation with somebody that was making the patrons uncomfortable, and they would defend themselves or be like, whatever they want to say, it's a free country, I can stand in this bar if I want to. I'm like, well, it's privately owned and I can absolutely ask you to leave. And the people that were silent and maybe not even involved, or whatever, they were distant from the interaction. And sometimes I've even felt like, was that the right call? Like, did I make the right call there? And I come back into the bar and they're like, thank you. And everybody's like, that was awesome. Thank you so much. Now we know that if they hold somebody accountable, they're like finding their voice, because they know that somebody on staff will support that voice. That somebody on staff also agrees that consent is mandatory. And they're not afraid to, like, you go to a straight bar, whatever, and somebody touches you inappropriately and you tell them, don't touch me, or somebody's hitting on you and you're like, I'm not interested, please stop talking to me, chances that the bartender is going to be like, they said stop talking to them. Like, is under question at our bar, because they've watched us hold people accountable. They're like, if I say that and then I have to call on help, they're also going to agree that they should stop talking to me.
Yeah.
But it just creates safety by example.
And like one last piece I want to say about that, because the queers as a community have always like set tones in society. We've always been like good at that. I think we're starting to shift the narrative about service industry as well because of these conversations. I don't know if you all saw it went viral. This straight white guy bartender passed the woman her check, and instead of a check, it was a note that was like, the guy you're with is creepy. Give me a signal if you want me to like save you. If you need a hand. If you're fine, I think he like was like push it back to me face down if you're fine, or you know what I mean, or nod. I think he like wrote out instructions, and I'm like, it didn't used to be bar culture, right? And this is like this like good looking cis appearing straight appearing guy at this like kind of divey straight bar taking that initiative, and I'm like, these are the things we should be celebrating and talking about. This is how we shift the narrative. This is how we change the world.
There was like a good example of that that someone brought up to me, where it's like, if someone feels uncomfortable, ask the bartender for Angela.
Yeah.
And so,
Or
and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
and so like, that's something that I want to bring up next time. I wrote it down on my phone. I was like, we need to have these systems in place, because again, like, because it's so nuanced and it's so like these experiences happen so quickly, and like you can miss it, and like you could have missed the boat real quick. It's like, just to be able to call on that as soon as possible is like something that I'm just starting to build upon, because my time at the Eddy is like more of like my narrative of like coming into my own and like allowing myself to be seen, because my entire life being Asian American, adopted from New Jersey, and queer, like I always wanted to fit in, and this is the first time where I'm like, let me stand out and let's create a space for everyone to stand out. And I think it's a cool moment. It's definitely a work in progress, but it's cool. Yeah.
So, I mean, we are just about to hit time, and I'm not going to cut you guys off. I do want to. I would like to sit here all day long.
Tell me to shush. It's fine.
No. I think one more thing, like how individual hospitality workers can build conversations with our community to instill that trust and gain that trust with them. Like, what are some? I mean, maybe speak to not being from the community as well, being able to kind of create that safe space for the LGBTQ plus community.
I think it's just being open to listen to the experiences and stories of members of the community. And it goes back to like being able to walk into a conversation and just looking at a person, like, you have a completely different lived experience that I have, and I want to hear about it. Because like, if you work in hospitality, chances are you want to hear like why people come into your bar, you know? And so that can translate as well to your staff, to future hires, the way you interview people and the questions you ask and the way you introduce yourself. I just saw this really good. This is so like a tangent. I'm sorry.
No, I love tangents. Do it. Give it to me.
A commercial. I think it was one of the hiring companies, and the way that the interviewer said like, "Hi, my name is X. My pronouns are he and him. Are you willing to share how you would like to be addressed to a trans femme person?" And like the entire like commercial just made me cry, because I was like, this is really on my TV right now. I think it was Indeed. I don't know. But it's just like creating, yeah, just like those little tiny moments of empathy go a really long way. And language is really important. Like the words that you choose to use and the way that the tone that you use is very important. Because again, we are so sensitive to microaggressions and aggressive behavior. So like the lack of that like makes us feel so emotional and so welcome and so warm. And so for me, that's like the first thing I look for. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the culture is the culture has to change around the idea that like but people that have trouble or are starting to understand the nuances of language tend to only ask people that are androgynous their pronouns, but no one else. Or that's suggestive, or they never feel the need to give their pronouns because they identify the way they were assigned at birth. So they're like, well, duh, I'm a girl. And but what is a girl? Like, we need to start to the allies and people that are realizing this, if they could do a better job of starting to say, across the board, I'm interested in your pronouns. I'm curious about you. In this industry, asking questions is completely encouraged and acceptable. So ask a lot of questions. I think if we could shift the tone culturally around, I only ask when I'm confused, which is microaggressive. And it's just something that I check in on normally, and I'm making it part of the typical conversation. That's a game changer for how much we feel like we belong in the greater, in the macro culture, right? And we've been asked a ton of times in opening this bar, like, are these spaces even really needed anymore? Because you can be gay anywhere now. And I'm like, well, no, we can't, first of all.
Stop. Where do you go? Give me an example.
Like, you can hold your girlfriend's hand. And I'm like, yes, I can hold my girlfriend's hand in more places. That is true. I'll give you that. We've made some progress. Yeah. And if I'm a single human, if I went into a bar like me as a single human and sat down at a straight bar top, and I thought there was a pretty woman down the bar, and she was femme presenting, I would never feel safe enough to be like, hey, what's up? Right. And like hit on her or suggest I was interested, because how being queer is like somebody assuming you're queer could be offensive still to so many people. And I'm also like, if she is offended, I don't have the support of this staff, because they're going to be like, they could potentially be like, ew, you're gay, right? Like, so we don't know that inherently when we go into spaces. We don't know that inherently until every person I meet, I know is like, yeah, gay people, just like everybody else. Cool, it's all good. And then I don't belong and feel safe to be myself and like come as I am everywhere I go. So I feel like we're a ways off from that.
Yeah, and I think to your question, Corey, about like how we get these messages out, I think social media has been really useful, and we on our social media are really grateful to have so much resource to signal boost. People are already doing this work, and when people like kind of feign ignorance, and it's feigning ignorance, you have a computer in your pocket. This is not something you just can't find out about. But I also, part of my work on my privilege is offering myself as a resource. Like if I don't know, for instance, I have a family member who recently came out as off the binary, and their parent was really like, I don't know how to do this. Yeah. And they were like, I keep fucking up their pronouns. And I'm like, right, you've known them their whole, I'm sorry, I cursed. Oh, I was doing so well.
There was only one the whole time, you guys.
We hit the hour. I didn't curse for a whole hour.
Yeah, just cut us off.
Sorry. But their mom was like, the they, them is hard. And I said, yeah, you've known them for 35, 40 years, however old they are. That's ingrained. I said, so what you can do to be helpful is ask them words they don't like to be described as. Like I know queer people who don't like pretty or ma'am. One of my favorite things we found is non-gender ways to say yes, queen. And my favorite, look, I'm going to fix it. It's F it up, my liege. I say that too, right? Isn't it so good? I'm using that all the time. And I think to Parker's point about that commercial, introducing myself with my pronouns is an easy way to ask someone for theirs without putting them on the spot of calling them, making the spotlight on their pronouns. I've instead just shared mine. And being just that start for me and I'm cis and I present as cis, but like my kid is 18 and pretty feminine presenting and non-binary. So they are not someone who's going to be asked their pronouns, which is hard for them. So
I think
just normalize removing gender.
I feel like in this moment though, I mean the word, let's talk about the word ally, because I feel like that word has sort of lost its meaning over time, right? Like I feel like people are now self-claiming that word, and they are not allowed to self-claim that word. You are not allowed to say you are an ally unless I tell you that you are, or someone of the community tells you that you are, or recognizes it in a way. The other thing too, you're not going to get a gold star or a pat on the back for the one time you went out to a gay event. It doesn't matter to me.
And put it all over your story in one afternoon.
Exactly. So the main one of them,
your picture with me.
Yeah, or you know, you put a rainbow on your shit on the Pride Month. Like this makes me feel even more weird because you never say anything the rest of the time. But my point is that to be in active allyship is really to educate yourself on things that are unknown to you, right? So the more, like you said, you have a phone in your damn pocket that has all of the information in the world on it, basically. Like, let's be honest. Maybe from different points of view, but you know what I mean. So the point is to really educate yourself on something that you're not aware of. If you can't figure out pronouns, maybe you should probably research what pronouns are and the reasons why people use them. If you are unsure as to why your grandson is gay, get on the internet and research the injustices of our community, research science, whatever the hell you want to do. Use your time to be better. And then maybe we'll call you an ally, but we'll see.
Yeah, no, I think allyship, and I think in the deaf community, you don't get an ASL name unless it's given to you by a deaf person. So you can't name yourself because oftentimes names are a letter. And so that's, to me, that's a similar situation there where I can call you an ally or speak to your allyship. I just interviewed a straight bar owner. We do our pop-up at a straight bar on Sundays, and someone asked us why we chose this bar, and I said, well, it's owned by a brown woman and run by a black gay man. So if I'm going to invite patrons to put their money somewhere, this is why. So the owner, Gracie, is Korean and phenomenal. She's the best human. She's my hero. And we spoke about her allyship, and I asked her, you know, for all intents and purposes, you can make money on booze. You don't have to be an ally. And she was like, my allyship is rooted in wanting more for the world I leave behind. It's not, she's like, I love you. I love Carl, who's her GM. I love you and Rach, but it's not about y'all. I love you and I'm grateful, but it's about doing the right thing all the time. She's like, it's the same reason we are changing how we use straws and like being mindful of recycling. She's like, we're changing the world. We're making the world better. And she's got 2 kids and she's like, and I want their world to be better too. So I think that's how you ally, and you consistently look for new ways to do a good job.
I think people too that want to be allies and self-appoint themselves as allies, they have this language around like, well, I'm just really trying to understand, or I don't understand. Well, maybe it's not for you to understand, and maybe your understanding isn't the thing that makes me valid. Like, you don't have to understand this experience. I don't understand
lots of your experiences.
Black humans, Black communities.
100%.
I never will. I can't possibly. I'm never going to have an experience that's like, oh, I get it, right? So I don't need to understand. What I need to do is know that I believe you because you've lived it, and I didn't have COVID, but I absolutely believe COVID's real. Like, I don't have to experience something to make it valid. And I think that I get upset with people when they're like, well, I just don't understand. And I'm like, hey, you don't have to. You just have to like appreciate the fact that people are different. And we all make this place cool and better when we're together. And let me do that. Like,
that's the other thing.
And protect me when you hear somebody trying to offend or be violent towards me.
Exactly.
That's the other thing, though, too, is that it's not up to us to educate you on the things that you don't understand. And as much as you can ask me questions or anyone questions, whether you're at the bar or whatever, on these things, it is up to me to feel comfortable to explain them to you. But also, you should be doing your own damn research yourself. This is the reason why I said in the beginning, listen, this is a good jumping off point. Stonewall, if you would like to like at least get your toes wet, you know, like it's not up to me to educate you on things that are benign or unknown to you. Like, I am not your teacher. You are an adult that has all of the resources in your pocket, as we said, or at home on your laptop. Like, it's easy for you to ask questions and want us to do the work for you. but really you need to be doing the work if you're seeking to
let's
ally.
talk about that.
That's part of the reason why I offer myself as a resource, because
no offense,
a little crazy. Well, and it can get a little crazy. So like, I look forward to utilizing my privilege.
Yes.
I'm approachable, and also if
Right.
you have questions about gender, you should not be asking an androgynous person who's called you out for using the wrong pronouns. Don't go to them and be like, could you do more emotional labor on my behalf?
Yes,
exactly.
In that moment, that's the worst. Somebody like misgenders you, and you're like, she. And then
Well,
they're
you
like,
also just have to realize.
tell me about why you expressed it. No, I don't want to talk to you anymore. I'm
You
offended.
already messed up.
Yeah.
You've already put too much emotional labor onto the individual that you've already harmed. And like people also you need to understand that other people have different capacities for the amount of emotional labor that they can handle. Not everyone is willing to be your educator, and especially for free, you know? Like we're not licensed professionals. We're not getting paid to literally do the work for you. If you want to be an ally, like you should turn off your phone, off of social media, and read a book.
Right.
You know,
or go on BuzzFeed and find like ways to not screw up in the LGBTQ community.
Also, a gift to viewers
it
that
takes
are
10
not
minutes.
in the community. Get out of your echo chamber. Like, get out of there. Stop hanging out there. And you could learn so much if you would sit with a group of people that weren't like you, maybe several people that weren't like each other, and not ask
Let's
questions.
look at your social circle.
Listen to their
what does that look like?
Yeah, exactly.
Just listen to what they're talking about, and listen to how they're talking. And you know, we get like funny and catty and petty when we talk about like our lived experience when we're with like people. So like, listen to the way we talk about how many times we were misgendered, or how hard it was to go to the bathroom in an airport, or whatever story of my upbringing I share, and believe me. And like, you don't even have to ask a question. That's going to open up your perspective. But if you just sit with like Tom and Jane, forget it.
Yeah, like we tend to use humor when we talk about our lived experience as well, because it defends us. It protects us from bringing back and unpacking all of those boxes, and then sitting again with the anxiety and the trauma of having to deal with those, because you will experience that exact same physical reaction. And so for those outside of the community who are an audience to us, we are being willing to open up and talk about our experience, just respect the fact that like, yes, we're making light of it, but you can kind of take a note to see through that and see the pain, because we are happy and proud and funny people. And that's because we had to learn how to be in order to get through. So,
and when we talk about this, we don't like when we talk. I talk about it like every day, right? My trauma, right? In some ways, usually funny, usually like reminiscing on some crap. And I don't always want it to be like an intense moment. So like, don't like be in that circle if you're gonna step out of your echo chamber and be like, oh, can we unpack that? No, I'm happy to Can we unpack like how your mom used to treat you when you don't want to do that either. Like, I'm trying to relax. So I think like keeping it light is a coping mechanism, right? Like
And also,
I think a powerful starting point is, can I ask? And then respecting it, mean it. Don't just say it as a precursor so that you can ask, but just say, can I ask about that?
That's my favorite thing to say, like right before I ask a question. And I know it's like in that gray area of like, this could be right or wrong. It's like, I have a question. Can I ask it? You can say no. And I will respect you when you say no.
It's powerful and truthful. And like I say, I don't know what that is. Like that's a favorite. And I'm a Leo. I have very much of my ego still intact. So it's not easy for me to be like, I don't know about that. Or I don't know what that is. But it's a powerful thing to say, like, for instance, and I get this a lot in panels about queer stuff, interestingly, I use the term AFAB, assigned female at birth, or AMAB, which is used a little bit less in the circle I've run with, but assigned male at birth. And I'll use that in a chat, and people will be like, what is that? And I'm like, oh, happy to tell you. And this is what I mean by like being a resource. Yes, go look into, Google that and look it up. And in this moment, because of what I'm talking about, like how I use the word queer as an umbrella statement for older queers, that's a hard, they don't like that. And I respect that. And I'm like, what do you like to say?
I think oh, no, go ahead.
I was just saying, we were in a discussion the other day on an event we did, and they had invited a variety of humans, which was great, and perspectives in industry and different industries. And in the I was right before I was supposed to answer a question. This person was answering a question, and they told a story about an employee that's one of the relatives that is, she's transitioning and using he/him pronouns, and she, and I was like super triggered and really aggravated because I was like, when I think I'm in a safe space, I totally like let my guard down and get comfy. And then when that stuff happens, it hurts me more, like it hits me harder. So I was like caught off guard by this. And I was like, I get that we want to be like inclusive and bring people in that have things to learn. And like now I feel harmed right now because that's super terrible what you're doing to this person. So I wasn't sure about how people would take me calling this behavior out, but I was like, I can't even think right now, so I have to say something. And I shared, like, so this is a good example of a place where you have now misgendered this human several times in telling that story. And we expect that you're gonna make mistakes, but when you do that to him, say, I'm sorry, right? And correct yourself and be accountable. But it was her tone was almost like annoyed in telling the story. And I was like, I don't feel safe here, and this is a conversation on how to make this community.
It was like about queering your business or something, and this person was a business owner.
I was like, I don't think she should be in this conversation.
Wow.
Like, we need to be really careful. I want to include people that are allies, but they need to be appointed by us. Like, she was not appointed.
Yeah.
Well, you know,
yeah.
And the other thing too is that even people within our own community are not educated on their own community. I know that I can honestly say that, I mean, the life that I grew up with, it's not an excuse, but I didn't have the opportunity to really start paying attention to everything until I was in my 30s. I was like, shit, I'm part of this community. I need to educate myself, because when I grew up, there wasn't pronouns. There wasn't, you know, I grew up in a small town, and again, it's not an excuse. But if someone within our own community is doing the work, then you can too. Like, how many times have you actually had to research your own damn straight white community? Right. Probably never, because you don't have a history other than awful history.
When straight people are in the bar and are like, you know, I'm just feeling really uncomfortable and discriminated against, like, this isn't for me. And I'm like, well, you're right, it isn't for you. And like,
you have every other place.
If you expect this entire community to step out of the way and part the sea for you, so you feel like you can have fun at our expense, the door is there, and every other bar in this city is actually built for you. So, like, I don't have time for, and then, you know, this is what Joe said this earlier. We've had people be like, I'm going to Yelp you. And I'm like, I'm going to Yelp you. Get out of here.
Bad customer.
What is your
reverse Yelp?
Right now. But yeah, and I think you make a really good point, Corey, and I'm so grateful for your willingness to call yourself in that way. I didn't meet a queer person until I was in my 20s. Yeah. Ellen was, I'm going to be 40 this year. So I'm old enough that we didn't have resource. We didn't have social media. I mean, MySpace is where I started, and even
Same, I'm 38.
It was an echo chamber. It wasn't like you were getting the opportunity to educate. So I agree it's not an excuse, and I agree our generation has work in that. And I think in that vein, some of the violence that's upsetting to me the most that happens to transgender, non-conforming, and non-binary people is perpetuated by the queer community.
Yeah,
and I know that the gay men, it seems like, is a lot, but as somebody who we ran a queer women's space, and there's a lot of harm ready to be perpetuated, that it's our responsibility.
No, we can be very problematic. Absolutely.
The biggest problem with that is the straight community that wants to not get on board and doesn't want to have to do this work. All they need is one person from inside the community to say some messed up stuff about an element of our community, and they're like, we were justified. Even the queers don't like those people. And it's like, no. Don't let that one person.
No, you're right.
And also, this is the other part. I'm like, we are everywhere. Everybody. There are assholes in our community. Oh, shit, I did it again. Sorry.
option, I did it again.
Yeah. But like and this is, you can dislike someone for the things about them that are problematic. Caitlyn Jenner.
Yeah.
But you cannot dislike them because they're trans or queer. That's not the thing we don't like about them.
That's
and
not
we're
the
not
problem.
going to perpetuate transphobia because she has problematic other parts of her.
Yeah.
I still 100% respect a trans person as a trans person and use non-transphobic language, and also be like, don't like you, not likable by me.
Exactly.
And I will defend you. We have a when we were in the streetery during COVID, we have a community member. I don't know a lot of the details of her life, but a community member that would like solicit people and try and sell poetry and put glitter on people and get way too close to members of restaurant or patrons of restaurants on the patio. And it's all during COVID, so we were like really careful, and we're communicating with her often. And she was always really upset with us because we were like, you have to get 6 feet away from my patio. You can't come through the patio. Stop putting glitter on people. And she, of course, jumps to this idea that we're that me specifically, that I am transphobic. And I was like, so that's actually not my challenge with you. It's the proximity to my patrons in this time of COVID. And we had a person on the patio.
White woman.
We would tell the people on the patio, like, if she comes by, you can just say no thank you, and I'll take it from there. Because I didn't want anybody to mistreat her. So I was like, we got it. Just say no thank you. So I have you have not consented, right? And this person comes by. She comes by, and we get her to leave these patrons alone. And then one of the people on the patio, who was, I'm going to give details that feel pertinent to me. She was a white, lesbian, former military, maybe currently military human. And she was calling her all kinds of names and using all the transphobic slurs. And I heard about it from my safety management, and so I went over and I was like, what are we talking about, guys? And like start to include her in this conversation, engage her. And she keeps going. I was like, so we don't talk like that here because this is a safe space for everybody. And she was like, oh, this is America now.
The new America.
All the free speech and blah, blah, blah. And started getting really kind of wild. And I was like, okay. And Joe was kind of in the bar. And I was like, so we need their check. I'm like, so we're done tonight because this is harmful to not just me and my staff, but also the patrons that can overhear this and this human that deserves protection.
Yeah.
On her way out, she throws her drink on me. And I had to turn around and go back in the bar because I wanted to fight her. And I was like, all of this, and this person that I'm defending and protecting hates me and is claiming like transphobia. And I'm like, and at the end of the day, it's still worth it every time because we're not going to do that. Like, we're just not going to do that to each other, you know?
Yeah. I mean, we are on the topic of getting your education, get your stuff together if you're going to be able to treat people with respect. And that's it. Do your work. Do your diligence. Like, don't use us.
Yeah,
that's
don't
it.
be a
It's
jerk.
like
There
that's
are so many ways.
3 words. Do the work.
Yeah. Do the work. Do the work. Well,
and show up. Show up can mean doing the work or coming into the bar or asking questions or
I like to give this perspective to people that often, and in my life coaching often, you're going to grow and change no matter what. It's happening. It's inevitable. So you might as well do it intentionally and in the right direction. So like, don't let the world that is around you just sweep you away and change you whichever direction it's taking you. Like, be intentional. Pay attention to what information is coming into you and how you're putting that information out. It's happening either way, so participate. Like,
yeah. Well, in sake of time and in sake of closing, I'm going to allow you guys to say closing remarks on our session today. And I do have to say, this is one of the more honest conversations with an LGBTQ plus panel that I've had. And I have to tell you how much I appreciate it. You guys are all such intense, but intensely beautiful and intensely wonderful people. And I knew that right when I got on the call with you earlier. So please close us out with final remarks on the actual session today, how important queer spaces are, LGBTQ plus spaces are, inclusivity, all of that.
Sure. I would just say, I would say happy Pride. I'm really, really grateful people got to get out and have pride in whatever that meant for them. I really want to thank PDXCW, Andrea, Campari, you, Corey, Park. I'm so grateful for people's time, for people listening, and we can do this. We can do better. Like, that's actually an option, and I'm so grateful to have more and more conversations with people all over the country and the world who are willing to do this kind of work every day. I think, Parker, the fact that you know what to do with herbs and cocktails is very cool. I'm very proud of that I know that somebody who does that. And I'm just grateful that we're holding each other accountable in such a loving way. And I just think we can do better. And I'm so honored and grateful.
Yeah. I'm going to second all the thank yous and not go through the list again. This has been delightful. I obviously, after the year we've had, I think we needed this COVID to lift a bit so we could socialize. I think, as humans, we're built to connect, and a lot of that happens in bars and restaurants. And I think security and belonging is a baseline human need, and it's really hard for our community to feel that. And oftentimes we lose our youth to the lack of it. So I really appreciate everybody that's doing the work and showing up in that way for the youth. And, I think that it's not complicated. And if you're overcomplicating it, it's probably your guilt. So check yourself, and we can do this together. We need to do this together. We all have something to learn. We all don't know it all, but we can do so much better and get on a different path. And I'm available as a resource. She is available as a resource. Go to our website, email us if you want to help. We're all here to help. So I do not mind the emotional labor. I would rather you ask than go without knowing.
Right, and go be a dick to someone else for no reason.
Don't be a dick. It's not hard.
Put that in the bottom.
Yeah. Actually, I put that on the bar at our last bar, because these people would stand at where the bar back would get to behind the bar. And especially people that thought they knew us. They clearly weren't friends because they were standing there, and our friends know better. But they would stand there and block that path. And so I put a piece of tape that just said, "Don't be a dick." Because I was like, if you're standing there and see that, you have to know.
Rule number one.
You have to know. Rule number one. Rule. It's not hard.
Parker,
thank you. We appreciate this. Good to get to know everybody.
Thank you so much. Parker, close us out.
This was so cool. This was such a fun conversation. Third to all the thanks. This has been a very cathartic conversation. For me, it's like I'm a really good example of like a late bloomer who kind of had to find his way on his own. So just be willing to sit with all of your emotional traumas and feelings, and just like try to just nitpick at things and let things go and pack things back up as you continue. And I'm speaking specifically to the younger generation of queer bartenders that are coming into the scene, because I was there. And you don't have to feel like you need to open or create a giant queer bar all the time. You can just create very tiny impacts day to day. And then next thing you know, you're going to be called the queer cocktail bar without even meaning to. And so just like live with that and use us as resources. I am not a licensed professional, so I'll give you advice based on my own personal experience. But again, just ask questions, do the homework, research into the history. There's a lot more queer history that predates the Stonewall riots. So learn about that and support your siblings, because we have to keep each other safe, and we can do it. It's less like what Rach said. It's not that complicated once you stop overcomplicating it, because I used to, and you don't have to. So thank you very much. This was so much fun.
Good. I'm glad. Thank you. No, again, thank you guys. This has literally made my day. If not the year as of right now. But if you enjoyed this class, please hit the like or love button and show some love in the comments. If you want to see more Portland Cocktail Week classes like this one, please follow Portland Cocktail Week on Facebook and YouTube. All of our classes are archived there. YouTube for you cool, no Facebook kids. We're also at PDXCW on Instagram, so you can find out what's coming up there. And finally, please don't forget to follow Campari Community for the latest Campari news and events. Also, tomorrow at 12 Pacific Standard, 3 Eastern, I am hosting another session on the Campari community, similar to this one, with 5 powerhouses from our community on creating inclusive spaces as well. So you get double the fun this week to close out Pride. So again, everyone, thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I know we went over, but these conversations are so important, and it is important for us to not only have safe spaces, but to have the space to speak. So thank you, everyone, for lending your ear, and to everyone on the panel, thank you for lending your vulnerability and telling us stories and making us laugh and all of that. Anyways, I love y'all. Thank you so much.
Happy Pride.